Everybody, thank you so much for coming. I'm Max, and this is the third Grapevine event so far. It's all about journalism now. Our first event was about the future of journalism, and then everyone started doing future of journalism events. So we just decided to do something different. And in many ways, I think the journalism now is in many ways just probably more important, especially for many of the young journalists which are here tonight. The one thing I think we need to establish before we start is just what the hashtag's going to be for the night. If you guys are tweeting, I mean, it's open to debate, but I'm thinking maybe FTF, forget the future, of course with a hashtag in front of it. So yeah, if you want to tweet, then you're welcome to do that, and thank you very much. And I'll leave it to Archie, who I'll just quickly introduce actually, is a senior writer of The Independent, and he's just about to go to The Guardian to work on a weekend magazine. So it's actually his last week. Is it last week this week?
Yeah, it's my last day.
So yeah. Anyways, I'll leave it to Archie. Thank you very much.
Okay, hello everyone. So should first of all introduce the rest of our panel. Alex Hern is the technology reporter at The Guardian. Stephen Bush is on the comment desk at The Telegraph. Emma Hogan is on the Britain desk at The Economist, and Zing Tsjeng is news editor at Dazed and Confused. And later on, you've got a panel of much more august people than us who will be talking about the bigger picture, I guess, about what journalism is like today. It did occur to me that I thought this was sort of the young panel, and I realised, so that was an excuse, and I realised that the other panel actually has someone on it who's the same age as me and is editing a national newspaper, and everyone else on this one is several years younger than me, so I'm sort of stuck in the middle. But leaving that aside, I thought it would make more sense for us to talk about the kind of experiences that people getting into journalism can expect on a sort of a micro level, what it's like in the first few years when you're starting out, what sort of an industry it is to get into today, and how you can equip yourself well for doing that. So probably the best way to start that conversation is to ask everyone to talk a little bit about how they got into journalism, how they found that process, and how they'd advise other people to differ from their own course. And then we'll talk about a bunch of stuff. There'll be plenty of time at the end for questions, so do think about that as we go along. And Alex, why don't we start with you, since you're right next to me.
Cool. It feels very odd not to be live tweeting an event. I'm not used to not having a smartphone in my hand. I got into journalism essentially by failing to be a parliamentary researcher. I went and actually, back further, I got into journalism by failing to be an academic. Then I failed to be a parliamentary researcher, and then it all shook out in the wash. I hadn't got the university grades I desired, so was suddenly left with an aimless summer after university where I didn't have any work, any jobs lined up, and was panicking greatly. I volunteered 3 days a week for my local MP, thinking that Parliament looked like a good second place to be if you'd failed to be a political scientist. It was horrible. Parliaments are never a good place to be for any reason. But 3 days a week was enough to get a bit of an idea and an ear for politics, have something quite nice on the CV, and know to leave there as soon as possible. I then just applied for every single job that could use this vague mixture of being interested in politics and having been in Parliament and wanting to get out. I got a job at a left-wing political blog called Left Foot Forward. I actually scored their one and only paid internship before they hadn't managed to raise enough money to pay them, and after I left, they'd spent all the money that they raised to pay them. So for 6 months, I was a paid intern. It was glorious, and I burned the bridges behind me, ensuring that none could ever follow in my wake. 6 months at Left Foot Forward, I had enough economics experience to go to the New Statesman as an economics graduate trainee, and the rest is history. I've spent a year and a half there writing less and less about economics, more and more about technology, and now I'm at The Guardian.
Okay. Stephen, how about you?
Like Alex, I kind of bumbled out of university with no real sort of plan. I had kind of done some stuff on my student paper, but I thought, I don't really want to be a journalist. So that's worked out well. And so I thought, maybe I could go into PR. But then I realised I'm really bad at saying please to people, and I've realised that's actually quite a big part of being good at PR, is going, I know this is a terrible idea. just roll with it. And I was so after an utterly disastrous paid internship with a PR company, I kind of ended up unemployed again, doing sort of various terrible jobs, including a long stint when I was working in a bookshop, which people think, if you haven't worked in a bookshop, you think, oh, that sounds sweet. You're wrong. They're like these vacuums where crazy people come and ask you questions and then buy books on Amazon. It's every problem that print journalism has, but even worse. And then while I was there, I started kind of blogging in this kind of like, maybe someone will see this and that will cause them to give me money. I didn't really have a plan beyond the fact that I kind of knew that sort of everything had sort of gone a bit wrong. I thought, well, I have a blog. And then I was asked by Progressor, this sort of very small lefty think tank, to do a sort of weekly slot for them. And off the back of that, I started doing the odd piece for the Staggers. And then Ben Brogan, who'd sort of come across me from me writing sort of political stuff, was like, Tim Wigmore, who had my job before me, which was helping him to do the morning briefing, is leaving. Would you like to come in and ghostwrite for me? And to sort of be my editor and my sub, and to kind of be my sort of amanuensis. And so I said yes, because it was like, wow, it's like getting to work with the Rolling Stones if you're a political journalist.
I mean, kind of like that.
Yeah. It's actually, I think he's cooler than Mick Jagger. And so then I kind of started working for him, and now for sort of various reasons, I am the morning briefing person now. That is the whole of my job, and yeah, that's how I got to where I am now.
Emma?
Well, I'd like to say that mine is totally different from these two, but actually I kind of fell into it as well.
At some point we'll find someone who wanted to be a journalist.
No, yeah, exactly. I mean, I was sort of interested in it, and it took me a while to realise that that's what I wanted to do. I spent my gap year working for 8 months for a literary magazine. And then at university I also did student journalism, so chasing after people that I really wanted to speak to in the summer, probably irritating the hell out of them when sort of every other journalist was away in August. I was trying to get sort of Maggie Hambling and other people that I admire to speak to me. And then I went on and did an MPhil at university, and off the back of some research I'd done as an undergraduate, I wrote for freelance for some literary papers, and suddenly I then sort of realised that this is what I wanted to do. I thought that I was going to go into academia, but actually sort of writing for a different audience and writing about sort of different things each week, and sort of learning different things each week rather than specialising on something for 3 or 4 years is what I wanted to do. So after graduating, I spent about a year and a half doing freelance work and interning. And I was an intern at The Economist for about 6 months before they took me on. So that's sort of my sort of slightly bumbling trajectory as well.
Zing, is your trajectory bumbling?
Oh yeah, I mean, I wanted to be in advertising. But I completely...
Mad Men, or?
This was before Mad Men. I thought it sounded like a fun way to write and get paid for it, and then I just found a career that asked me to write without getting paid very much for it, which I thought was much better. I did a little bit of student journalism as well. I then interned at a couple of broadsheets, went and interned at Diva Magazine, which is a magazine for gay and lesbian women, and really, really enjoyed working on a magazine, and then went and did a magazine journalism degree at City University. And from there I interned at Wonderland magazine, which you might better remember as the fashion magazine that put One Direction on its cover with puppies. And I interned for them for a month and a half, and then straight out of university they offered me the job of online editor. I worked there for a year, and then I interviewed for the job at Dazed, and I got the job as digital news editor, and I'm there today. So that's a sort of potted history.
Well, I mean, if it's any consolation to anyone who actually wants to be a journalist, I'm one of those incredibly boring people who did always want to be a journalist and did a student paper thing and did a postgrad course and then applied for lots of jobs, repeatedly didn't get them for a really long time, which I'm sure many people in the room will be familiar with. Then finally got one and found that it got significantly easier once you had the first foot in the door, which I'm sure is everyone's experience, that first step is easily the hardest one.
It's odd. I always wanted to be a journalist, I just assumed I couldn't. Like, a complete unexamined assumption that being a journalist was something that you had to be working towards from a very early age and had to be laser focused. And I'm still not laser focused at anything.
Yeah.
I'm scattershot to the extreme. And so kind of realizing that it is something you can decide to do, before you're wearing...
Well, it's not like being a doctor, is it?
Exactly, yeah.
I mean, fundamentally.
You don't need to pick your GCSEs to be a journalist.
Indeed.
And if you didn't, you can still be a journalist.
Yeah. And, well, that brings me on to whether... This is, I'm afraid to say, a very kind of Oxbridgey type panel that would confirm lots of people's accurate suspicions about what journalism is like and what a rarefied sort of environment is. And I'd be interested to know whether you guys think that has changed at all in the time that you've been working, and whether, in particular, whether you think that anyone in this room who isn't from that sort of background should feel discouraged, or whether there are any kind of advantages when you're trying to get a job from having a slightly different background today. And with you nodding a bit.
Well, no, I think perhaps our bumbling way into the journalism was also when we graduated, a lot of people said, don't go into it, it's dying. And I think that's changed now. And, places like BuzzFeed are expanding their newsrooms hugely. And I think that partly because of that, the sort of stereotype of an Oxbridge graduate, being able to sort of intern their way into journalism is changing. And actually, there are opportunities now that there weren't before, I think. I hope, at any rate.
Zing, what's the kind of mix of people at Dazed like?
It's actually quite funny. There are a couple of Cambridge people. Funnily enough, they're all Asian. So I call them the Cambridge Asian Mafia. There aren't actually that many of us. In fact, I probably wouldn't be able to tell you what university a lot of my colleagues went to, because that doesn't quite matter at a magazine like Dazed and Confused. It's really more about, are you a laugh? Can you get on? Do you enjoy going out? I think that's what's more important, in especially a culture magazine. It's almost more important that you know the references and you get the background of, subcultures, of music, of things that are bubbling underground, rather than what Cambridge College did you go to. In fact, I almost would say that being at Cambridge probably hindered that, because I had no idea what was cool when I was at Cambridge, and I probably only really learned about it when I moved to London.
Okay. Stephen, presumably the Telegraph comment desk is full of people who went to polytechnics.
It's basically like Compton. I mean, so I'm in two minds about this. In that, it is a problem that there are lots of people from two, and in some places, one university, which dominate large chunks of the media. But it is actually a lot easier to fluke something for a 90-minute interview in your undergraduate, I know because I did it, than it is to pony up 9K for a journalism MA, which is, of course, the other sort of big... Because I would say, actually, the thing I would actually say is if I have proved anything, it's that you can completely mess up what you do in the year after you graduate. You can do everything wrong, and if you work hard enough because you're too dopey to quit and you can't get another job, eventually it will all work out fine if you sort of don't give up.
I mean, I broke the tech desk's long trend of not having people from Oxbridge there. The head of technology at The Guardian went to art school. So there are people who have, completely the wrong university career and still end up. And I think it isn't unfair to say art school is the wrong career for journalism. If you are trying to be a journalist, don't go to art school. That's simple enough. But I think for me it is... I think it's not a coincidence that all of us told stories of vaguely bumbling into journalism. I think that's what the Oxbridge advantage is. Yeah, it means that you partially are imbued by a university of a sense that bumbling around is something that can ultimately be successful, and partially that you're imbued by society with an image of someone who bumbles and is ultimately successful. And the two things play off against each other. I think dedication plays better and is more necessary if you went to another university, but that there's not an inherent advantage to having gone to Oxford or Cambridge if you then try and go in through the same route as everyone else. It's that those side routes, I think, are the ones that open up if you have an Oxbridge education.
I must say I feel quite pessimistic about the whole question, and I do sort of feel that when you look around newsrooms, I think it's not just the kind of the extra time that people get in order to never give up, as it were, because they can afford to, but it's also to do with the fact that I think there's a way of behaving and a kind of a a way of speaking and a way of projecting yourself, which is still something that people, I still think that has an unpleasant, unconscious effect, and I still think that's there. I think the other thing that's important and difficult is that I think lots of people actually understand that this is a huge problem, but the trouble is that to fix it, you need to be in a position where you're hiring people and making choices in a proactive way, and unfortunately most places are having hiring freezes, and it's hard to change that when it's already in place, and you can't just ditch all your Oxbridge graduates and replace them with other people.
Please don't ditch all the Oxbridge graduates and replace them with other people.
So the next thing, because we haven't got too much time, so we should try and be quite quick in answers. I'd be interested to know if you had an image in your head about what you thought your journalism workplace would be like before you started out. When you arrived, was it kind of exactly as you imagined it would be, or how is a newspaper or a magazine or a website different to the kind of external view of it that you might have hoped it would be like or feared that it would be like? We should start with Stephen.
I think that there's an assumption that journalists always know what's going on, that they understand technology. I mean, I've worked in places where people didn't understand what a GIF was, and they sort of assumed you could attach a GIF to an email just by screen capping it. I remember on one of my first placements, I had to explain what Facebook is. You're forgiven.
Ian Hislop doesn't know what any of that meant.
Yeah, no. We'll let that one go. In my first placement, I had to explain what Facebook was and why people used it. I also had to explain what methadone was, but that's sort of by far. So I think that is one advantage that young people do bring, that you sort of are naturally born into a generation that understands digital technology and digital culture as a result far better than, older journalists in the newsroom, definitely at more traditional and more conservative establishments. And I think that is a definite advantage that you need to play because, it's one of the only things we've got, basically.
And have you had to explain methadone at The Economist?
No, I haven't. Although I haven't tried to explain it yet. So maybe I'll go back tomorrow and ask, do a straw poll. But no, I was surprised at how much people did know when I went there, and not at The Economist, but just when I was a freelancer and I was pitching things to editors. I'd just heard of something, and they'd had forewarning of this, months in advance, because they'd had sort of press people. So perhaps not so much when you're actually in the newsroom, but when you're, on your own in your room trying to pitch stories, is actually looking ahead a couple of months in advance. Is actually far more useful than saying, hey, there's this cool thing that people have heard of for quite a while. So that was a big surprise for me. But yes, I haven't had to do GIFs yet, or is it GIFs at The Economist?
It's
but,
GIFs.
It's GIFs. Okay, there we are. Okay, I'm already looking like a young Fergie, but it's fine.
Stephen, how about you?
I have this slightly weird experience with Telegraph, and I start work at about 4:20 in the morning. So when I actually get into the office, it's this sort of weird netherworld where there are no people, just me and the mice. And then when everyone else arrives, they seem very quick-witted and fast to me, because by that point I've been awake for some time, and at that point I've sent the morning briefing, so I don't really have to. I've kind of justified my existence for another day, hopefully, and so I kind of it feels like everyone is moving very quickly, but so I don't know really.
Okay, Alex, how are you?
The really boring answer is that The Guardian is covered so frequently by so many places that there weren't a huge number of surprises. It is a lot like what you'd expect it would be. The one that got me was The New Statesman. It's a magazine which, if you have any interest in politics, you've heard of. It's got a long and storied history, and it's put together by very few people in an era of almost constant panic with no budget. And you get there and you realise that, it's just pure effort that keeps everything held together. And, not even, the effort of the entire staff, really. The effort of 4 or 5 incredibly dedicated members of staff, some of whose names aren't even on the masthead. They're support staff. The office manager at The New Statesman. We would lose the magazine within the month if he left. Seriously.
Well, literally just physically lose it?
Yes, the office would everyone would have no swipe cards. We'd all be left standing outside, trying desperately to ring Stephen. But no, it's a wonderful, in terms of teachable moments from that, it's the way that a journalist and a team of journalists can project an image that is far greater and grander than happens behind the scenes. It's swans, serening beautifully on the surface, scrabbling wildly underneath.
I think the thing that I mean, it's now nearly 7 years ago, horrifyingly, but the thing that I remember being really struck by and delighted by when I finally did get a job after a long, painful attempt of many jobs I didn't get, was just, I think it's just one slightly heartening thing, is that once you're in the room, as I said before, it's just, you know, if people can commission you for free, they will commission you all the time. And the difference it made to have your face around the place, basically you just reach a point where the moment that people can kind of, they're not particularly looking, I've found, editors, for knowing that you're the greatest writer on the planet or the greatest reporter, but just like, if they get a sense that you're not an idiot and you're going to file on time and you're going to hit the right word count, then you'll get commissioned, and just being in the room is so, and then things open up so much, and I think that is one thing. I imagined it would be this incredible, this is sort of what you're saying, I suppose, about how it's swans, you know, it's sort of, it was far less stratified and far less kind of, oh, well, you cannot write a cover feature until you've been here for 4 years, than I had kind of anticipated. Which leads to another question, which is whether you guys think, if I'm thinking about interns in particular, because I always feel incredibly sorry for anyone doing an internship because it's such a crappy deal. And I'm not going to talk about the question of paid internships, which I think the other panel will cover a bit, but just if you are visiting and you're trying to make a good impression, or if you're in your first job, how do you not piss people off? Because I mean, my sense is generally that the hardest thing about being an intern is trying to strike the balance between being remembered and doing useful stuff, and just drive everyone nuts by asking them for things to do when they haven't got anything to give you to do. So I don't know if anyone wants to...
I mean, journalism is quite lucky in that there is always one task which no one wants to do and is really useful, which is transcribing. If you go around and offer to transcribe things for people, you will get grateful responses instantly, and you'll have a miserable day, but they'll know who you are and be grateful. I mean, unless, you know, they're me, in which case I'm too embarrassed to hand over my tapes, because I absolutely never want a single other person to hear me interviewing in my life. I mean, then, you know, the problem is a lot of the advice requires you to have found some miraculous way to at least have someone who, if they don't know your name or even your face, vaguely know that there is someone over there they can throw work at. If you are, for whatever reason, an expert on a topic, I've only been very junior at small organisations. None of this applies if you're at a newspaper, because there will be someone better than you at absolutely everything you can do, and you have to deal with that. But if you're somewhere like Left Foot Forward or even New Statesman, you may know more about something than anyone else. That doesn't mean every day find an angle on today's news that involves Bitcoin. But it does mean if there is something about Bitcoin, offer, maybe, you know, write on spec, make it interesting. Free copy is always valuable, like you say. Yeah. Free copy that they're not going to get another reporter to write, or to write as well, is even more valuable. And then maybe people will track you down and commission you for other things. But all of that relies on you at least being accepted in your workplace well enough that they'll even take copy from you.
Zing, what's the kind of, how interns, what kind of stuff do you get them to do, and what's useful?
What's really useful, actually, how I made an impression in every single internship I did was just by being very good at transcribing. So I touch type, which means that I can look at people, have a conversation, still be listening to something and still be typing at the same time without looking at the screen. Everyone was singularly amazed by this ability. It was like I was some kind of witch. And I swear, this is how I made a good impression on many of the editors I worked with. And once they get over the fact that they can throw you a transcription and you can do it within 2 hours, or an hour even, like, they'll run out of transcriptions, and then they say, oh, do you want to do like maybe a short nib? Do you want to do a short story? Do you want to call up this person? And that's how you get over the initial hump. You know, you just do the one thing they always want you to do, and do it really well, so much so that it makes an impression. And you'd be surprised really at how bad people can be at transcribing. I mean, I've gotten back transcriptions where I literally just don't understand what, like, I did an interview and I'm looking at being like, is it the same person that I spoke to? Because it sounds like completely different person. So I mean, that's how I got my foot in the door at, you know, Wonderland. I also kind of just piped up in meetings. I mean, the one thing that made a publisher actually look at me and acknowledge my presence was the fact I knew who Creation was.
It's so tricky though, that, because there's like, I mean, equally I can think of plenty of interns who I've been like, just shut up in conference in the morning. And to be honest, you know, and I think that's such a hard thing to try and get right. But, yeah, go on.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it depends on what kind of conference it is as well. You know, is it the kind of conference where Alan Rusbridger is talking and everyone listens? Or is it the kind of conference where people are sort of dipping in and out? It's more like a conversation, because that is definitely my experience at the fashion magazines that I've worked with. They've been very informal places where you can make an impression and where you can speak out. And in a way, it is good because people want to hear what young people are about. They want to hear what young people are interested in. But again, I'm coming from a kind of fashion and culture magazine like Dazed and Confused, where it's much more important that we have people whose ear is to the ground.
Yeah. Emma, did you start as an intern at Economist?
I did start as an intern. I sort of started on they have an annual publication called The World In. So The World In 2013 was the one I worked on. So, I mean, I think, it definitely depends on the context, but I definitely don't think you should be afraid of pitching things and pushing a bit. I mean, the best advice I was given by a journalist at another newspaper was just not to be invisible. And I think, in a huge newsroom, interns can risk being invisible, even if, they do risk then seem annoying if they go on.
Yeah.
But so I just pitched a lot and wrote for different sections, and sort of somehow persuaded them to let me stay on for a couple of months, continue to write things and ran a blog for a bit. So I think that sort of quiet persistence can do wonders, perhaps.
Stephen, are you quietly persistent?
Maybe just loudly clumsy. I think, transcribing absolutely. Anything which sort of takes up a large chunk of your day, like having to do furniture, like, the week to come, which kind of, you look at it in the paper and you go, that can't possibly take half a day, but it does. A willingness to take things off people's hands and then do them well does mean that you're remembered, and also people are grateful not to have to do the week to come.
Yeah. I think that's, my sense is always that I think the obsession that everyone has, which is a complete mistake, is getting a byline. Like, the moment you've basically had more than kind of 4 bylines, their interest and significance wanes enormously. And I think I've certainly known people, I remember having this feeling myself, who felt that the success or failure of a first stint at a place was completely dependent on whether or not they got their name in the paper. And the fact is, if you've got your name on the paper on a rewrite of 200 words of wire copy down page on page 28, that doesn't really mean very much. If, on the other hand, you've really helped people and you've I just think it's mainly just consistently not being an idiot. And I remember my greatest sin as an intern was being asked to write 500 words of very straight copy on something and being quite excited about it, and then filing 800 words of slightly florid copy that was probably like 15 minutes late, and just do exactly what you're asked to do and do it on time, and then people will trust you and then they will ask you to do other stuff. But if you give any sense that you might be a liability or you might just not be professional, basically, then I think that's the thing that can be curtains.
I think it's also really important, once you've filed, if it's not quite right, to go and ask the editor, what could I have done differently? Don't be afraid to sort of ask them for what they want, basically. I think if they don't tell you that.
Yeah. One of the big things that always surprises me, or surprised me about interns I met at the New Statesman, was the number of them who... A lot of the interns at the New Statesman were fundamentally invisible to me, either because their interests lay on the culture desk or with politics, and I was working on economics, or just because they did sit at the back, were silent every now and again, went up to whoever they met on the first day and sort of asked if there was any photocopying to do, and that was it. They kind of just fell between the cracks of the office. But there's been several interns who I met and liked and kind of respected for the copy I got from them, who I then heard nothing from ever again. Yeah. And I was quite disappointed. I was at the time running a blog which took submitted copy. Active on Twitter is probably an understatement. I would follow all of these people and they wouldn't tweet. They just kind of fell between the cracks after. They thought the internship was over and that was it. Yeah. They'd done it, and then I guess went back, quietly applied for jobs in journalism for a few months, didn't get them, and decided to do something else. And that was heartbreaking to me.
Yeah. Okay, well, we should get on to questions in a second, but the 2 more things swiftly. One is, I'm just interested to know if you're thinking about people a few years younger who would be coming into the next generation, if that's generation. What are you kind of afraid of that you think they're likely to be good at that you're not good at? What skills would you like to have that you're horrified that they probably do?
Coding. Unambiguously, it's being able to code, and that's not like sit out and bang out an iPhone app, but that's essentially any type of just automation using computers on a level beyond the sort of thing that gets you marked out as computer literate at a big office. Right now, just purely by virtue of being under 30 in The Guardian, am seen as computer literate. I'm a tech reporter, I would hope so. But the minute someone arrives who, as well as having all of my skills, can also whack together something to scrape data from a council website, or whack together something to automate. Today I received a dump of 5 million Gmail addresses, which there was an allegation that the passwords have been leaked from them. Don't worry, only 2% of the passwords actually work, so it's barely 100,000 people. But I had this, and obviously I can't put the file up to download, but we spoke with the lawyers, and it would have been okay to put a checker in. The sort of thing which is, I know, 10 minutes work, if you can do it, so that you can type in your email address, see if it's included in that list. If it is, change your password. And it's just the sort of thing which, if I could bash it together, I would bash it together. But it's not worth calling in someone from the development team. We have a data journalism team, but they work on long projects by and large. That would scare me, seeing that in a new person.
Guys, what else?
Yeah, coding and data journalism, definitely. I mean, especially in areas like fashion and music and art, they do tend to lag behind what's happening in technology. But I think now what you're seeing is technology will start infiltrating every single aspect of daily life. You will be expected to know how to understand technology, how to write about technology. I mean, when Silk Road happened, when people started buying drugs online, a lot of people just had no idea how to write about it. They were like, how do I even access it? This URL doesn't work. I've typed it into the Google bar and it doesn't come up with anything. These are things you have to learn, because these stories are just going to get bigger and bigger, especially because there's so little regulation, because it's like an international economy. You have to understand stuff like that. And also coding, definitely. If I learned how to code an app that perfectly transcribed every interview, I'd be rich. But because journalists don't know how to code, we're just like sitting on a kind of gold mine that we've never actually explored. So yeah, learn to code. It's probably not as hard as you think it is. I mean, I'm trying to code,
imagine, yeah.
So,
Guys, Emma,
Yeah, I mean, I suppose, sort of data-driven stuff. I mean, we do it quite a lot at The Economist, but I mean, there's lots of, new ways to sort of, as Alex said, to scrape data and so on, and that's, is, I think, something that I'd like to know more about, and I'm sure that people younger than myself do. But I mean, I think that for all that, things are moving in a different direction, news is faster, and we're consuming it in a different ways. I think that there's still a place for sort of fact checking and things that are sort of being gone through a due process, and I think that will always require. I mean, it sort of that requires a certain set of skills that you need to just learn, and that you learn when you're a journalist, whatever age you are. I think basically.
Actually, another language. Coding is something, and I wish I was better at, and I didn't. Sort of sometimes when the whole briefing goes bold, and I just sit there crying at the desk. Being able to fix that quickly would scare me. But actually, just having a European language to the degree of fluency you have English is, if you want to be a political journalist, is only going to get more important. Learn Mandarin, learn French.
I was going to say I feel less concerned that someone who wants that I want to do is going to kill me by being good at coding, although clearly that's going to be vitally important. I think the other thing is I feel there's an awful lot of English graduates still and history graduates, and I do wish I sort of can skate by on some economics, but I really wish I had a deeper understanding of it, and I think that is something that cuts across every single kind of strata of journalism today. So last thing for questions is this may just be an excuse for me to tell an embarrassing story about Amol if he's here, but I wonder whether you guys remember your kind of worst mistakes. Are there any particularly awful moments that stand out from your early days that might be kind of solace to anyone here who feels really embarrassed about anything they did when they were starting out? You may not have one, it may just be me.
I don't have a funny story, but I do have life advice, which is just never write into the CMS. I don't care how fancy your digital content management system is. I don't care if you're assured by developers that it has automatic saving every 30 seconds. I don't care if you can see versions totting up as you write. Write offline, save offline. If it lasts for more than half an hour, save twice offline, and then at the end cut and paste it in. Because the first time your browser crashes or something goes wrong in the inscrutable back end and you lose everything you've written, you weep and you never do it again.
So practical. Guys, any terrible moments in your lives you want to share?
I mean, every day, really. I think I've done probably 200 briefings, and I think that means I've made 200 horrific mistakes, like ranging from the Danny Douglas Alexander, the best thing, if a yes vote happens, that will thankfully not be a problem anymore. But once, I can't remember what the mistake was, but it was awful, and sort of Ben came in, I was actually kind of shaking, and he said, Paul Dacre, and this is a really good phrase to always used to say at the end when they went to print, thank God we've got tomorrow to fix the mistakes we made today. And it's just a really important thing to bear in mind that once it's done, if it's on time, it's finished. Kind of just make it better the next day.
Yeah.
I will give is always make sure your pickup goes in the mic jack and not the audio jack.
Yeah.
Okay. That is vitally important.
Yeah.
My horror story was that I was asked to write a news piece, my first piece I got to write for The Independent on Sunday about Mad Men, and instead, for reasons I don't fully understand, I just sort of wrote a review and I handed it in and I thought it was really great, and I opened the next day to find a completely different piece with my name on it. I just had such a mortifying, I could never talk to that news editor again because I was so embarrassed to have just done something so useless. And Amol, editor of The Independent, a very august person, was asked to write a colour piece on his first trip to Praia de Luz during the Madeleine McCann story. He got a call from an angry editor saying, I need a colour piece as quickly as possible. I didn't know what a colour piece was. So he thought about it a bit, he scratched his head, and then he started writing, and he handed in a piece of copy that began, the azure sky glittered over the clay-coloured streets of Praia de Luz, and just had lots of colours in it. So, and he is now the very successful editor of a national newspaper, so let's hope for everyone. So, questions, please. Yes. Hi.
Are we having mics?
Are we having mics?
Is this working? Okay.
I mean, you can hear me, I think.
I can, but they may not at the back, so.
I'd like to, alternative language. You mentioned language. If you're a novelist, language is what you do morning, noon, and night. And when I was at Harvard Law, was there, Eliot had just died. People were worried about language being in crisis. There was the idea that language was going on tubes, literacy was coming upon us, and the press was going to be the place where we saw that happening. I wonder how your generation feels about language now. Now we have keyboards all over the world, we have social media, we have other ways of thinking. What's going to happen to language? Is there identity in language? I mean, I still find identity in the New York Review of Books, but do you guys think language is the place that identity resides, truth, wisdom, etc., or is there a crisis?
I think it's really important to remember that our generation is the first one, probably ever, where writing and the written word has been the primary way of communicating. For more and more people my age, I know it's certainly true for me, I speak more to my friends and actually most of my colleagues in the written word than with my voice. I am more comfortable expressing myself, not just expressing myself in considered journalism, but expressing myself in every register I speak in. I'm more comfortable expressing that in the written language, and I think that does wonders for tone, for variety, and for colour.
But at the same time, we're not the first to be the only people to express ourselves through written language. I mean, what about Jane Austen writing letters and then crisscrossing with because she was ran out of space on the page?
It is worth remembering that many people in the time of Jane Austen couldn't read or write.
Yes, that's a very good point. That's a very, very good point. I mean, apart from good Jane, but I mean, I think that I can see what you mean, that you were worried that we're sort of limited to 140 characters, or that we're texting. I think that people are worried about these things for ages, and actually, there's still a sort of there's still a value in writing good sentences, and that if we handed in shoddy ones, we probably wouldn't have our job. So I think that we value them just financially, if for nothing else.
Although I do think one thing I've certainly noticed about being a journalist, which probably lots of other journalists are aware of, is that I think it's made me a more efficient writer, but also a worse one. I think the process of piling stuff out every single day does not make you good at writing. It makes you good at figuring out how to do little shapes that will get you through 1,000 words in 45 minutes. And I think that's not a good thing. But I'm not going to pipe up if you have anything to say. But I'm just to get through more questions. Just say something if you have something. It won't come to everyone.
Just quickly as well on generational stuff. One thing that our generation can do is submit clean copy. By and large, I've not met an actual professional journalist under 30 who has submitted copy as bad as some of the copy I have subbed of professional journalists over 50.
I think that's absolutely true. Yeah. Next question. Yeah. Hi. Oh, sorry, wrong side of the room. Should.
You spoke a lot about sort of falling into journalism. Do you still think that the more traditional journalism skills are important? Sort of shorthand or law?
Shorthand or law? Law, like, I mean, I went to American journalism school, so I had completely hopeless command of British law, and I also didn't get shorthand, and I would say they're very important, to be honest.
Yeah, as someone with incredibly illegible handwriting, I do wish I had shorthand, but I don't know whether that would just become even worse having that. So, but I mean, that is something that I did think maybe I should have this.
Yeah, I think maybe it matters more depending on what kind of area you want to go into. I think it's definitely useful if you're a news reporter. Having said that, I'm a news editor and I don't know shorthand. So,
But you hate transcribing so much.
Yeah, it's true. So I love transcribing. I love recording things. So yeah, no, I would say if you're thinking of doing shorthand and you're fairly sure you want to go into news, yeah, learn it. It'll probably be an asset.
It's not essential.
I think they're useful and I regret not having them, but I like having £9 in my pocket and a year's head start on my career more. In an entirely serious answer, like, I wouldn't trade that.
I think the thing about shorthand is that, particularly if you are talking to a MP above a certain age, it gives you it is a kite mark of, I know what I'm doing, I'm not, you know, a bumbling child. They find that out later, of course. But I think actually shorthand is much more important than the legal stuff. The legal stuff, you know, mostly actually the thing I've really learned is just send it to the professional lawyer who knows what they are talking about.
Although I will say, I mean, I do think there are lots of editing jobs where it does wind up being extremely important, and I guess it may vary. I don't know, you guys may have deeper layers of backstopping than we do, but I do sometimes feel grateful that I have picked up enough, because I think if editors, the good thing about editors being good at the legal stuff is that it means that the lawyers don't get to set the terms.
But but the thing I've really found about having shorthand now is when I do a vox pop, even though I will never use my shorthand because my handwriting is so terrible that I can't read my own shorthand a lot of the time. If you are on someone's doorstep and you are making shorthand, you are a real person. You're not just some weirdo with a tape. And so it is really useful.
See, I have that, my backstop it, which is record things on a real dictaphone, not your iPhone. Same deal.
Yeah.
You look official.
Okay, next question. Yeah. Sorry.
Hi, this isn't really a question, but more a reaction to what you guys were saying. And I hope it will give a bit of kind of inspiration to those people who didn't go to Oxbridge in terms of applying for jobs in journalism. So a couple of years ago, I was on the other side of the interview table looking for candidates for the Times graduate scheme. And the thing that really stood out among the 300 or so people we got in that year, more this year, was desire. It was nothing to do with Oxbridge whatsoever. It was desire. And the 4 people we took, not a single one of them went to Oxbridge. And what marked them out was the fact that 3 of them, we'd rejected the previous year, and we said, look, go away and get more journalistic experience, and then come back. And there were no guarantees they'd even get a shortlist at that time. They all did that, came back. One of them, very impressed, Emma Tucker and myself in an interview, just because she looked like she'd bite off her arm to become a journalist. And that is what you need. Nothing to do with Oxbridge whatsoever, although there are still plenty of Oxbridge people in the Times. And finally, one advice, if you do get into a national newspaper, do transcribe things by all means, but it's all about ideas. That's the currency of newspapers, is ideas. It always will be.
Can you introduce yourself?
I'm Alan Hunter. I'm the head of digital at the Times and Sunday Times.
And my other thing I'd be interested to know is were you consciously looking for people with a different sort of background, or was that just how it turned out?
We were looking for the best people.
Yeah. Okay. Anyone have any reaction to that?
I think now that I've commissioned quite a lot of writers now, and I do consciously find myself commissioning more and more women, more and more people who aren't white, people who are LGBT, just because the things that they pitch are unique. They've got a unique viewpoint in the world, and you know, in culture journalism, a unique viewpoint is what marks you out. You just don't want the same angle, the same boring angle on like, Don Draper says something about masculinity in the 20th century. You know, that's just boring. People if you have a selling point, by all means use it. Of course, the flip side of that is that you don't want to like ghettoize yourself. You don't want to become the Asian journalist who writes about Asian stuff, you know. But it is a useful way to get your foot in the door. And as an editor, I'm definitely drawn to people who offer something like that, you know. And also just as a way of evening the playing field, because, you know, God knows there are enough like white straight guys in journalism already. It's time to let the rest of us have a go.
Yeah.
Well done, Ian.
Okay, yeah, so, or do you want to go there? There's a question here first, so that might be easier, efficiency-wise, and then come to you next.
Hi, I'd like to ask you how important you think specialist knowledge might have been in getting you through the door, or once you're through the door and getting you that really good story, versus a kind of general knowledge. I think there are kind of two extremes in reporting. You can have a sort of, you know, an expertise of an area, but there's a general knowledge that is just about good enough for reporting. Which one is the best to go with?
I mean, I think I sort of have slightly an odd answer to this, and that I started really as a poetry reviewer for The Economist, because they didn't have someone who covered poetry. I did that at university. And somehow I managed to persuade them to let me write about infrastructure and go down Crossrail and go on the West Coast Main Line. So I think that you kind of need to have both. And that sort of, I went there and I said, you know, I can write about this stuff, and I did it. But ultimately they took a chance that I would, you know, be able to write about HS2. And it did take a while to move between those two. I mean, from, you know, poetry to infrastructure. But yeah, I think it's good to have both, but you have to be able to be willing to learn about new things, and that's what's really exciting about journalism, I think.
I'd say you have to have, it's less having specialist knowledge and more showing the ability to generate specialist knowledge very quickly. You have to have enough of a general knowledge background that if you are thrown on a story, you can write it, but then, by the time you're on the second story, you need to be an expert on it. And it's that ability to sit back and go, oh, Jesus Christ, what is a Dogecoin? Okay, right, I know that. And then the second, third time you interview someone on it, you ask them the insightful, pressing questions.
Either of you?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the one thing that will probably make you a really good journalist, or at least give the impression of that you are a good journalist, is the ability to learn things very quickly and pretend that you know what you're talking about. Just valuable skill in life in general anyway, but especially valuable if you're talking to an editor who doesn't have the time to understand a topic like Dogecoin or Bitcoin, and you can offer all the answers.
The only thing I'd add to that is that I think there are kind of two tracks, and it can work both ways. I think there are people who've done both. I think journalism would be better if there were more of the people who are proper specialists, to be honest, but that's how it works. Oh yeah, sorry, it was this gent here, I think. Yeah.
Hi, how is it not a fatal cancer at the heart of journalism, where that eats at the essence of truth, when virtually all the journalists come from a very small elite group of schools in this country? Thank you.
Well, I think it is a bit of a cancer. I mean, I went to a public school, so I'm certainly in no position to say this in a preachy way. I think it's a huge problem. And I think we've sort of talked a bit about how structurally difficult it is to change. Stephen, you're about to...
Yeah, I mean, I think it is a huge problem. I didn't go to an elite school. Actually, I think there's a danger whenever we have these conversations as journalists. We go, isn't it a problem that journalism is dominated by a clique of posh people? Yeah, I mean, I write about Westminster every day. There are much bigger problems in this country than there being a lot of posh people in journalism. Kind of like, it's true, but I think there is, that is a bigger problem to do with Britain than it is to do with journalism.
I don't know. I mean, there are certainly bigger problems, but I do think that journalism should be self-reflective about it, because it is a highly specific industry that has a chance to shape how people think about stuff in a different way. Anyone else have a contribution to that?
I agree. I agree. It's a massive problem. I think I'm with Stephen in that it's a problem. It is a problem which has its roots in the fact that journalism reflects the establishment that it covers. Journalism obviously has a responsibility to change it, despite that establishment, but it is part of the establishment. It's not its own.
Lisa Mark, who was the editor of the Independent Sunday, was...
Sorry, can I just say one more thing? I'm Get Your Share on Twitter. Thank you very much.
Sorry?
I'm Get Your Share on Twitter. Please follow me.
Oh, right.
Thank you.
Lisa, you're
I was just going to say that I left school when I was 16 and slightly under a cloud, and I waited for more than 30 years to go back to talk to the students, but I did it this morning, coincidentally, and talked to them, and it's a non-selective grammar school. Well, it was a grammar school, but it was not a private school, about getting into journalism. And the one thing that I said, which I thought was really interesting about what you all said, was about being willing to sort of more or less do anything, because quite a lot of the interns that we get at the paper have this sort of sense of entitlement, and they don't want to do the sort of shitty jobs. That's fine, you know, I get it, but somebody has to do them. And the way journalism's going, and it's so, you know, the pond is shrinking, you know, someone's got to do that, and it's unbelievably helpful. But, you know, as this chap from the Times was saying, you know, people who are sort of just show grit are so much better, and, you know, they're going to get further. So I guess that's what I want to say, but particularly I didn't go to Oxbridge, and I've got a cool job, so.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people enter journalism, and in their first year you think, I'm going to write a 20,000 word feature for the New Yorker by the time I'm 23, you know, which is, no, you have to go through hoops, you have to do your time. There are a lot of very useful things you can learn, like on local newspapers, by getting byline-less, like, nibs, by, like, you know, writing reviews that you will never get credited for because it goes out into a newswire. That you have to look at it as a cumulative process. You can't just be all about hitting the big milestones, because that will come later in life. Do your time, be grateful, be humble, but always kind of know your worth. Like, if you think that you're not being treated well, if you think they're taking the piss, you know, you will find somewhere else that will appreciate you and that will recognize your worth. You just need to find the right place.
You grab the mic.
Hi, I'm Liz Harris. I work in the Managing Editor's Office for The Times. And I think in terms of the comments about people's education, so I am from Australia. Schools, people's parents chose to send them to me, nothing to me. I'm the one who goes through all the CVs, lots and lots and lots of them, and I would love it if they were only one page. It always surprises me the people that have just come out of university and have a 4-page CV. However,
you need to know about their swimming activities.
And you know, the time they worked at Primark and the pub they worked in. You know, please put the most relevant stuff at the top and keep it top page. It would be really helpful. But I think, as Alan was saying, you know, we are interested in what you've done. We are interested that you have passion for journalism, that you work hard. If you come to us to do work experience, we take more than 500 people on the Times, and probably about the same again on the Sunday Times every year. Please read the papers before you come to us. Come to us with ideas, and listen and learn and ask questions. I think, as other people are saying, turning up straight out of university and being arrogant and not asking questions and pretending you're one of the gang when you're at the Times with people like Danny Finkelstein and Phil Collins, nobody's buying it. Ask questions and learn.
Max, do we have time for one more question?
Yeah, I mean, we can do five.
Okay, I will do 2 more questions. I've been over outside the room a bit too much. So, the fellow on the left here, I guess. Sorry.
Well, this one is next, I think.
Oh, okay. Go for it. Wherever you
Hi, my name's Alex McDonald from the Wall Street Journal. I wanted to ask, to what degree does following people on Twitter or having followers on Twitter change the way your managers perceive you as a journalist? And if it does, do you think that's a rightly placed value?
I think it's kind of a bullshit value in a lot of ways, to be honest. I think it's vitally important to be really engaged in it and to follow people and be aware of it. But I definitely think I've come across people who've seen that I have a certain number of Twitter followers and are not aware of the many bigger idiots than me who have more followers and think that it's somehow indicative of something actually expert. But I don't know what you guys think.
But do you feel that your managers put value on that?
I think it has been helpful for me in an incredibly cynical way. I think it's been helpful for me as a kind of a profile device, and I think that's an awful... I promise it's not how I've ever thought about it, but I think it turns out that journalism is partly about building a personal brand in a grim way, and I think it's been helpful for that. But I don't think that's a good thing.
In terms of how my editors have looked at social, the bigger thing for me has been the number of times they've asked how I got a story, and I said, oh, I follow this sysadmin in Wisconsin who tweeted that he'd seen a spike of requests from Russia. It's that sort of thing. It's for me as a journalist and the way my managers perceive it, all of my editors have more followers than me because they're more senior than me and have been in journalism for longer than me, but I spend more time on Twitter and have cited it as a source more often as a result.
Yeah, yeah.
I think that you're both completely right. It's partly about your brand, but it is also, yeah, it's like, would I hang around more in a bar if I knew people who might one day hire me were there and people who might give me stories were there? Yes, of course. And Twitter is like that, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a useful tool, as Alex said, but I mean, I've never felt any pressure to be on it, you know, or to be tweeting. So you know, I probably don't tweet enough. I'm also, you know, I don't have a byline, so you know, people would have to sort of search me out to sort of find me.
I mean, I just mainly tweet Nicki Minaj jokes, which people seem to like. I don't know, it's kind of a double-edged sword because sometimes you do look at people who have a lot of followers on Twitter and you think, wow, so, you know, maybe they could really push the story out to a lot of new readers and maybe we could get a whole new audience. But then you also think, if they've got this many followers on Twitter, what are they doing in their spare time? I think personally, I think it's useful because you can use it to get in touch with a lot of people. Like when editors tweet, you know, hey, is anyone around to freelance for blah, blah, that's one way you can get in. And actually, because Twitter is on people's phones, they're much more likely to look at a notification that they've gotten because you just added them out of the blue than like an email that you sent because it's one of the hundreds of emails they get every day.
Yeah, I basically think it's very useful on receive and very kind of false on transmit, you know. I think that's the thing. Max, have we got time for one more? There's Jen here I said yes to. So.
Hi, my name's Tom. I'm politics editor at the News Hub. Just a reflection, really. The panel said that, you know, we alluded to the fact that we're at this time of really extraordinary technological change. And I think you can add to that cultural change, right? The center of gravity in terms of the news-producing world is moving eastward. It just seems funny, you know, we're sitting in England and obviously there are certain rules and so on to entering the professions. That's true of journalism, that's true of all sorts of professions, politics, etc., etc. But a lot of the debate has been about how do we get into their titles. If you're a kind of journalism graduate, you know, they have this amazing title, and how do we get into it? It just strikes me someone had to found The Economist, someone had to found The Times. Given that a lot of the majors are chasing blogs and chasing smaller publications, smaller titles, which are doing more innovative things, technologically speaking, culturally speaking, in terms of point of view and voice. What about starting out on your own? What about, you know, taking technology and running with it? It just seems like something we've not covered at all.
Yeah, yeah, you're absolutely right. I think views.
I mean, I'd say journalism is already a rock star career in that it is a career where a very small number of people are paid quite a lot. Most journalists scrape by. I think going it alone is a way to really magnify that. If you do it well and have an astronomical amount of luck, and both of those are equally important, yeah, you can be far more successful in a much shorter space of time, starting something afresh. But I mean, what you're saying is, have you considered combining the difficulties of journalism with combining the difficulties of starting a small business? Maybe if you did them both at the same time, at the very beginning of your career, stuff could be amazing. It could, you know, like it can, and you could be extraordinarily successful. But you could also end up doing absolutely nothing, writing to absolutely no one. There's a reason why being a staffer on a national paper or magazine is quite nice and an appealing prospect.
It's an inspirational line. Anyone else have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, from a fashion perspective, that's definitely, you know, like Susie Bubble, Brian Boyd, these people are filthy rich now. They've got handbags named after them, but they came at the exact right time. You know, right now, if you start at a fashion blog, you're one of thousands of fashion bloggers desperately trying to get fifth row seats at a fashion show that no one wants to go to. It's about knowing the moment and seizing it, and that in itself is already pretty hard. I mean, that's what newspapers and magazines have been trying to do, desperately trying to stave off their own destruction for years. So, you know, if you know that you've captured the zeitgeist, yeah, go straight ahead, but it's going to be difficult.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to think that it would be possible, and I think that it is up to a point, and that, you know, when you're a freelancer, you kind of are you're going to loan. But I think that perhaps, you know, as you alluded to, you know, the exciting things, you know, new technology and, you know, all the new ways of sort of, you know, absorbing the media and you know, what's happening in sort of Asia and sort of, you know, and so on. But I think that, you know, there's enough new exciting things as startups and so on to go into, and those places are hiring that, you know, perhaps it's quite good to get your good to get your foot into the door in those rather than setting up your own. I think perhaps.
I mean, if the question is, should you consider going to work for BuzzFeed as well as considering going to work for The Guardian? Absolutely, yes. If it's that level of new media that we're talking about, established new media brands, absolutely, yeah, they're hiring more people. Like, if you didn't consider that, you would be staving off about 90% of the places that will hire a young journalist.
And certainly, I think it's much more concerning as the institution. When we asked that question before about what you worried about the people coming up doing, I think it's more of a concern for what the institutions coming up are doing than for the individuals. And I think that's probably better.
Yeah.
Leave it there. So, thank you very much. Mazel tov.
It's a smash. Okay. We have a half-hour break now. There'll be food, drinks downstairs, and then we'll be starting half an hour. So, just want to come back up here after them, and that'd be great.
So he trashed his character, raised questions about his and then John said, I'm not going to do anything, but that's so then we
1 2 1 2.
Julian is indefensible.
Yeah, I was just wondering.
It's pretty quick. I mean, it's fun.
Yes, I mean, I sort of see him occasionally, but he's fairly busy. As I yes, I mean, for a 3-hour lunch every day. No. Yeah, no, I'll try and keep it tough.
No, I saw Adam Curtis the other day, and he said that he was getting guest with Simon at one of your events.
Oh, right, they're bound to have done. It's Adam's job.
I think he
membership model thing that's just come out.
Yes. That's because you're not talking. Yeah. We're talking over you, obviously, as a woman, which goes straight across.
had a white on black logo.
Savvy with social media.
Yes.
Shoot the head, people.
We're very brutal to those who disagree with us, yes.
You've got a kind of caliphate in Shoreditch.
Go for the armchairs.
Cool kids caliphate.
We're still very much a member of, my friend.
Really signed up. So essentially everyone here wants a job. They all want jobs.
Yeah, that's it. So apparently we have to steer the questions away from how do I get a job, otherwise it gets a bit boring.
Yeah, exactly.
And also a good idea.
You have to run away afterwards. You have to
No. You have to take them all to a bar on the collective and just let them bring you food.
They'll expect us to pay.
No, you're right. That is the
Okay. Is everyone here? Is everyone comfortable? I think we're about to start. If anyone's at the back, if there's any chance to sort of moving up so we don't get scrunched up by the door, that would, I guess, be quite good.
There are two armchairs right here.
There are two armchairs. And there's one, where was it? Oh, there's actually one seat on the end here as well. Okay, cool. Are there many people left to come? Person who just come in? Are there many people left? No, okay. Then we'll start. Yeah, thanks again for coming, everyone. I think, yeah, it's great to have you here, and it's a packed house. So it's great. I won't talk that much, apart from say, yeah, this is our third event, and when we were sort of emailing and sort of phoning people to sort of ask them and invite them if they'd like to sit on this panel, we started by taking 4 massive long shots, and you know, we just thought, you know, you may as well ask, and here they all are.
Suckers.
All right, mate.
Well, George, no. Okay, George. Sorry, George. George chaired the debate last time, so he was like a medium shot. Sorry, George, because he'd done it before. We knew we could rely, and we liked him so much. He was so good. He gave the guys such a hard time, so I'd watch out.
Stop digging.
Yeah, no. So I think, yeah, this is going to be really good, and I hope you enjoy it. And yeah, and just to give a quick introduction to George, he is he's the head of journalism's much sort of respected journalism department, and he's also the author of a great book which you should all buy. It's on Amazon, called Out of Print. And yeah, we'll have just one sort of last announcement at the end, and then you can all go and feel free to hang out in the bar downstairs. It'll still be open for a while, so sort of talk to each other and get to know each other. That'd be great. Anyways, over to George. Thank you.
Thank you, Max. Okay, let me introduce you to this panel, second panel of the evening. Furthest away from me is Amol Rajan. He's the editor of The Independent. At the beginning of his career, he worked for The Right Stuff on Channel 5 and The Evening Standard. Then he went respectable and he joined The Independent. And he became its editor in 2013. Next to him is Alex Miller, who is the editor-in-chief of Vice. And he started there in 2005 when his title was New Bands Editor. How cool is that? And the other
Factually
day...
incorrect, but cool.
Oh, okay. That's what it says on your Vice biography. Where am I supposed to go for more authority? Never mind. The other day he wrote a piece called Katie Hopkins and the Dangers of Obverse Journalism, which I had to read in order to discover what obverse journalism was. It's rather good. It's waiting for you on the Vice website. Next to him is Emma Tucker. She's the deputy editor of The Times. She started her career at the Financial Times. She worked in Brussels and Berlin. She took over FT Weekend. Then she joined The Times, where she was editor of T2, and now she's, as I say, its deputy editor. And right next to me is Ian Hislop. He's the editor of Private Eye. And when he was at Oxford, he had a magazine called Passing Wind. And you will also know that he's very famous on telly, principally from Have I Got News From You, but also documentaries and radio and TV. Now, I'm going to take it as my assumption that an awful lot of people in this audience, not 100% of you, who are interested in, let's just put it simply, getting jobs in journalism or advancing your jobs in journalism. But I'm going to approach this to start with in a slightly oblique way. Instead of asking this panel, okay, what are you looking for, what do you want to know, and so on, I want to remind you that when you're looking for a job, or in most particular when you're being interviewed for one, you really need to pay attention to what is in the head of the person who might ask you to do work for them or hire you. Right? So I'm going to ask all these members of the panel, when you get up in the morning, what is preoccupying you most? What is running through your head? What's worrying you? Okay, it's all right. You've got time to think of it. I did pre-prepare one member of the panel, so I'm going to start with Emma.
Well, and you did also explain that you didn't want me to talk about the mundane detail of my morning routine.
Absolutely right, I don't.
It's more a philosophical question.
Yeah.
So I think what I'm thinking about in the morning is what is there in the Times today that has made some sort of difference, that's made an impact, that people are reading, that is perhaps behind a select committee report or some questions being asked, because the best moments of my job, and for a lot of people in journalism, is when you've done a proper job of journalism, when you've come up with a story that has genuinely made a difference. And we've done quite a few of those recently, and it's a great feeling. So that's what I might be thinking. Secondly, I might be thinking, who's reading the Times? How can we get more people to read the Times? You know, it's all up in the air at the moment, the whole kind of media model, but we have ours, and it's going along, it's very successful, but, you know, we're always, what can we do to get people to pay to read the Times? Then the third thing is, how can I get a bloke on the front page? Because we often get criticised for putting women on the front page in a slightly, well, frivolous manner. So when my job is to sort of keep that balance.
Now, that strikes me as quite a traditional list. A deputy editor of the Times 10, 20, 30 years ago could have given pretty much that whole
Not
list.
the answer about a bloke on the front, definitely.
All right, okay, the bloke on the front might be different. The other things are fairly timeless, yes?
Yes.
So, say a bit more about getting more people to read the paper. That's not quite as simple as it was 30 years ago.
No, it's not as simple as it was 30 years ago. It was 30 years ago. It was, you know, people bought the newspaper on the newsstand. They might have had one delivered by a paper boy or girl. Now it's, you know, it's a totally different different environment. So we've got a lot more competition than we had. In some ways we don't. You know, the other sort of the big weighty titles there aren't as many of them as there were 30 years ago, but on the other hand, there's the digital competition. So it's, you know, in this noise, what do we do to make people subscribe to us? And their subscription can take whatever form they like. It can be a newsprint subscription, it can be a subscription to the app. We don't care, so long as they're paying to read us. But, you know, I go back to my first point. The way to get people to read the Times is to come up with really good, original journalism that makes a difference, because that, more than anything, drives subscriptions.
Amol, when you get up in the morning?
Three things. Well, I work for a Russian expat, basically. So the first thing I worry about is whether or not I'm going to get annexed by Vladimir Putin. And that has complications, so I tend to have some work that I have to do for him, which is ghastly. Second thing I worry about is which member of my staff The Guardian has poached that morning. The latest being Archie, you bastard. And the third thing is, I think, basically what Emma's talking about, which is the sort of, you have this very instinctive itch, this sort of curiosity to find out what's going on. So you want to know how your own newspaper front page has stood up. You want to make it reach as many people as possible. I always sort of tweet it and then sort of get it retweeted by the independent account. So you want to maximise the impact of your own splash and your own stories and try and make as much noise with them as possible. And you have a desire to see what other papers have done, which I think is the same as when you were deputy editor of the Times, George. You want to know what's the Guardian done this morning, other than take your staff, what's the Telegraph done, what's the Times done, what's the Mail done. And you just want to know. You were sort of probably in the office till 10 o'clock last night. You were kind of making late decisions about what picture to use, and you want to compare your judgments with them. Two really good examples of that last week was when this disgusting video of Sotloff being beheaded was produced by ISIS. We had all sorts of dealings with the Foreign Office about whether or not we could name the British guy involved, and we had to take a decision as to whether or not we put Sotloff on the front page. And I had a long argument with lots of people in the office. This is kind of when newsrooms come alive, and we took the decision that if we put him on the front page, we'd sort of be doing ISIS's work for them, and so he kept it off the front page and had an older picture of Sotloff, which I was really pleased to have done. And so what I wanted to know straight away that morning, so I had a desperate desire, if I hadn't seen the previous night, to know what other newspaper front pages done and to compare us against them.
Okay, thank you. Alex?
I don't work for a Russian expat, but I do work for a bunch of Americans who have a similar disposition. And so quite often what I worry about in the morning is if over the night there will have been a dramatic shitstorm on my iPhone, and I'll wake up to find myself in trouble for some inexplicable way.
Give me an example.
Oh my God, I don't know.
Rupert Murdoch's just taking a 5% stake in your company.
That was a good news story.
I mean, there are many examples. I can't dig out too many, but I think the second thing is, did I make a mistake? Did I make a mistake last night? Because we work with a lot of video, and quite often, you know, you're working on these things pretty up to the wire. You know, you've been through them 1,000 times. You've just got to make sure that you're checking it one last time. And sometimes is, did I make the wrong call morally? Or sometimes is, did I make the wrong call and just screw up some great guy who's been out in the field's work by kind of chopping it in a kind of haphazard manner and making it look clunky. So that worries me. So I go in and I press play and I watch it, and 75 times out of 100 I'm all right. And then I guess the third thing is, you know, did the people I sent out the night before to do some work actually file their copy? Or, and then was the editor awake to edit that copy? Did that copy appear on the website? Did the people who run the socials push that copy to the planet? Or am I waking up to look at exactly the same image that I was looking at when I went to bed? So those are the three things. I mean, I guess they're kind of pretty traditional. Bureaucratic.
Fairly. Pushing the social to the planet, not quite traditional, but anyway. Ian?
Yeah, that's not my first worry.
No, I shouldn't think it is. I didn't expect it would be.
No. Yeah, when I wake up, I'm because we're a fortnightly cycle. I mean, it's much slower. Obviously, in that, so I'm not thinking every night did I make a mistake. Whatever, it's a slower process. But I'm always thinking, have I got the story that will absolutely sing in the middle of the magazine somewhere? The story that will make me laugh. The story that will shock me. The observation in the journalism that will make me think that was worth getting Private Eye for this week. Obviously, there are two sides. We do journalism and we do jokes. Have we got anything funny enough? Is that genuinely funny? Is that good enough? And that's always a worry. I mean, you are competing against your last cover. You are constantly hoping that the magazine will be funny enough and interesting enough that people will continue to read it. And we don't have, as you probably know, a huge amount of presence on a lot of the other media. We are very, very committed to print, so all my concerns are traditional. And they are, have the cartoonists this week come up with something that will offend the readers, but not all of them, which is quite important. Are we in trouble legally? If we're not, is that a problem? Why not?
You claim to be the most sued journalist in British history.
I've never claimed that because it's quite a stupid boast. It means people come at you. But I mean, again, I mean, we have had 5. I mean, we had an editorial conference this morning. There were 5 people who sued us, and they've all gone away. I mean, that is in the last 3 months. You don't see that. But for us, it's very, very exciting. And for all the journalists who got the writs, they were shitting bricks. And I said, no, this is an accolade. You should be thrilled. Obviously, defend it or I'll fire you. I didn't say that. But that's what I worry about, is exactly your concern. Are we good enough? But the really heartening thing I sat through the previous panel was just to see some people who are actually having fun doing journalism. It's such a sort of misery guts panel of people going, oh, with the journalism, got to learn coding. Yeah, fine, do it. But is it fun? And if it isn't, perhaps you should do something else.
Exactly right.
That may give us a clue to what you're looking for. Right, my follow-up question, given all these relatively traditional preoccupations, is if you're hiring somebody, what are you looking for? Emma?
Many different things, but interestingly...
Boil it down.
Okay, what we're not looking for is somebody who's comes in and is just a complete digital whiz. That needs to be part of what they do, but it's absolutely not the only thing we're looking for. So I've been involved in quite a lot of recruitment recently, and so for the graduate scheme, it's will you get us stories? Are you committed to journalism? Are you prepared to go out there, get your hands dirty and find us stories? It's almost taken for granted now when you interview young people coming to the Times that they will be digitally savvy. It's interesting, you know, we don't particularly quiz them on that because it's taken for granted that they are.
No need to worry.
Yeah. So that's one thing. Then, you know, so yeah, how will they be good journalists? Will they get good stories? Are they committed? Are they enthusiastic? You know, usual thing. Then we've also, you know, we've decided to sort of expand our internship scheme, and we now take interns for the leader writers. And that's a totally different skill set. You know, we're looking for boffins. We're looking for first-class degrees from Russell Group universities, you know, because we want the future. When I was at the FT, there were 3 young leader writers. One was Ed Balls, one was Andrew Adonis, and one was Stephanie Flanders. So, you know, they all came in as leader writers on the FT. We'd quite like to find the next generation of that lot. And then, you know, perhaps...
But they do need to be able to write.
They do need to be able to write, and on the whole they can. They're scary. You should see the stuff that they come up with, honestly. Yeah, so I don't think that we're looking for anything that's particularly different from what, again, we might have been looking for 30 years ago. You know, we're much more professional and targeted about who we hire now than we were. But, you know, it's a good journalist is a good journalist.
Amol.
Just brilliance, basically. I mean, it's kind of obvious.
Easy peasy.
I don't think there's a kind of special quality that sort of journalists have which other people don't have. You know, the sort of people I would want to hire are extremely good with people. They're sort of people that you want to spend time with and that are good at, therefore, eliciting stories from people. They're people that love stories, they love narratives. They're people who are extremely curious. And obviously, they're people who are kind of willing to work really, really hard and, you know, put up with a lot of crap for a little while because they think there's something worth it at the other end. I have to be honest, I'm not looking for particular qualifications. I don't think that, I mean, I think it's brilliant and good for lots of people who do certain journalistic qualifications, but lots of people say when they're 18, you know, do I need to do a qualification? Depends, you know, it depends on whether or not you need one. I have to think the best, Don Bradman, who's the greatest batsman that ever lived, was once asked before a cricket season, someone said, how do you make sure you're fit for the next season? He says he makes sure he scores a couple of double hundreds, and there's a great wisdom in that, which is the way you get fit for batting is to bat. Similarly, the way you get fit for journalism is doing journalism. So I don't want anyone to sort of put themselves forward for a job as a journalist who hasn't shown a really distinguished track record of being committed to journalism. And that could mean someone who spent years working on the Ham and High, it could be someone who set up their own blog, it could be someone who's got 50,000 followers on Twitter because they're incredibly good at doing match reports from League 2 football games. So it's not, I don't think it's one particular quality, but it's just kind of all-round brilliance. Curiosity is important, and being good with people is particularly important.
Alex?
Well, a bit like Ian in that, you know, half of what we do is very serious and half of what we do is quite light. So I feel that if somebody comes to me and they can actually write a joke which is genuinely funny, then we're in business, you know, because it's incredibly rare to find anybody who can write a joke. A lot of people, you know, come to me and ask for jobs, and you know, they're very thorough and they're very good, but my God, they don't have a sense of humour. And I think that if you can tell a joke well, you can probably tell a story well somewhere down the line. You know, I'm interested in somebody who cares about where they came from, which generally is youth. So I'm often suspicious of people who aren't interested in subcultures, in young politics, in street politics, in music, in arts, interested in those kind of things. I'm suspicious of wonks who come in, who are very interested in the minutiae of parliamentary goings-on and the media. You know, that to me feels like a wrong fit. It feels like if we fill our banks full of people like that, within a minute, we'll be like everybody else. So yeah, I mean, yeah, you're right. Just being able to get along with people, right? I mean, it's really not rocket science. I remember my brother-in-law once saying to me, you know, it's easier to learn how to do any job if you can get on with people than it is for somebody who can't get on with people to learn how to get on with people. And it's true. You just need somebody who's going to come along and is going to be pleasant, enthusiastic, charismatic, has an interest both in ISIS and in, I don't know, mocking someone for wearing the wrong pair of shoes. Two very important things. And, you know, I don't know. We work in video a lot, so I've got to be honest, on the rather more boring level, it's important that people kind of are interested in working across various medias, but everybody is these days. I mean, it's, as you said, you barely need to ask it. And also, I mean, you never need to ask if somebody who applies for a job secretly wants to be a TV presenter. They all do. They all desperately want fame deep down. But yeah, that's it. Tell a joke. Be funny. Be charming.
Ian?
Yeah, I mean, I had a very specific encounter which crystallised for me what I know I want. I was interviewing someone for... We tend to employ people who come and done work experience, or there are loads of people who work for the Eye who did some time there. But we were actually interviewing someone. I was interviewing this young man, and he started off by saying, yeah, I think what I'd get from the job is...
Sounds great.
I feel... what it would be for me, and I was just thinking, I don't give a fuck. What do you want? I'm not your tutor, I'm not helping you. I want you to make my life very, very easy. I want you to appear with a brilliant story or, you know, 4 pages of fabulous written copy, so I can go home early. But I couldn't tell him this.
I don't see why not.
Why not?
Yeah, I probably
He's asking for it.
Yeah, I can't remember if I did or not. I've cleaned up the anecdote. But no, it's just a point where the people you hire, the people you want, are people who immediately come with something. And it's not saying, someone said earlier on a previous panel, or perhaps it was someone from the audience, don't try and hang out with all these sort of famous people. Well, I mean, you know, they're not that great. I mean, you know, none of us are. It's perfectly possible to come in. Someone, you know, we had a couple of very good interns recently, and one of them pointed out that we ran it in the last issue that, you know, Saudi Arabia had beheaded a lot more people than ISIS in the last 3 months, and they were the ones who'd actually paid for ISIS. So perhaps it was slightly hypocritical to make a fuss about beheading. And I thought, that's a bloody good point, straight in. You've made my life easier. And obviously, outside these walls, I will take credit for that observation. It was mine. But that's what you want. And it is, you know, people who do that. People who come to you with observations or stories. And I mean, most people who come your way now, because it's so competitive, are very good. But I mean, because we're a bit trad, I don't know a huge amount about the rest, but an ability to write, an ability to analyse, and an ability to spot what's interesting, those are the things I'm always looking for.
Wonderful. We got a microphone. We take questions from the audience at this point. Yes! Right down there. No, let's have them from the audience. Come on, it'll be much more interesting than anything I ask. There's a lady down there. She's very eager to ask a question.
Maureen Payton, freelance for about 40 years, I think, now, for the Nationals. I wanted to ask Ian Hislop a question, but first I wanted to get in my own Oxbridge story based on the last panel. I didn't go to Oxbridge, but I owe my surname to a man who was a cook at an Oxford college who described himself as a servant, but not a civil one. And I take that as a badge of honour, because to me, journalists should be, I happen to turn out to be a journalist, classic outsiders, questioning always the establishment. I understand that, Ian, you're from the establishment, and yet Private Eye does a fantastic job of questioning the establishment. You've broken so many stories that Fleet Street has only later picked up on. So how do you perform that incredibly difficult balancing act?
Well, again, people say, well, do you remember Private Eye in the old days? You know, there were those wild anti-establishment boys from Shrewsbury, all of whom went to Oxford, all of them, apart from Christopher Booker, who went to Cambridge. So, you know, there's a slight 60s myth about bohemian anti-establishment culture. The point is that a magazine like Private Eye, and most satirical journalism in Britain for the last 300 years, is written by people inside the club. It's people who know how it works and decide to describe it. You know, from Jonathan Swift onwards. You know, he was a C of E priest, for God's sake. He was hardly, you know, a street-fighting revolutionary. Lord Byron attended the House of Lords and picked up his allowance. Yeah, just how dangerous was he? You have to be careful about making those sorts of points. What we try and do is say, we know how this works, we know the people who are there, let's tell the truth. And the more people you know, the more people who tell you things.
I was going to say as well that there's more than one establishment as well. I know what you think you're talking about. You talk about the establishment, but there's also the establishment of, for example, Rotherham City Council, you know, which we expose. That's not Oxbridge. You know, there's more than one establishment, and you have to be across all of them.
But that said as well, I mean, definitely the only reason that I'm on this panel is because, you know, we've made the most of being entirely outside of the establishment and going and doing stuff which great guys from the BBC and ITV and Channel 4 have been doing for a very long time. Packaging it, saying it, you know, presenting it on a different media in a slightly different tone, and, you know, it's made people pay attention. So there also really is a benefit of being an outsider, I think.
What's different about the tone?
It's perhaps a little bit more relaxed. I guess I think a while ago there was a kind of collective decision, and I'm not sure why, that news was the preserve of a certain type of person who wore a certain type of clothes and who spoke in a certain type of way,
TV
like
news.
this.
You're talking
about. And I think that just by kind of basically presenting news as we would, you know, having a conversation with a friend or that kind of thing, as we would present something about music or as we would present something about fashion, actually managed to break down more barriers than we ever thought we would. And I think managed to disprove some bullshit which the establishment had kind of all collectively agreed in for ages, which was that young people didn't give a crap about what happened outside of their own lives. But we literally only managed to do that because we, you know, we just presented it slightly differently.
Questions? Come on. Yes. Up there. Oh, it's a long journey. Come on, Max, hurry up. Keep going. Keep your hand up. That's it.
Thank you. Both panels have sort of focused on young people getting into journalism through going and interning and volunteering and sort of hanging out in newsrooms and presenting themselves as useful, creative people with ideas and, you know, hardworking, curious people who can write well. I'm Middle East editor at Newsfixed, and we have a network of 500 or so journalists across 60 or something countries in obscure parts of the world. And a lot of these people are sort of young freelancers, the Arab Spring generation, if you like, of freelancers who've just never been journalists before, maybe written something for their student paper, and then just flown off to some part of the world where a dictator is about to fall and started filing for people. Do you think, how do you sort of rate those two different approaches? Do you think that one is more effective than the other if you want to make a career in journalism?
Amol, you use cheap labour in huge quantities. You start.
Absolutely right, including myself. I mean, it depends on the copy. You know, I mean, it's no one's got a particular right to be a journalist. You know, we've got a strength in the Middle East. We've got people like Fisk and Coburn, who are big names, have been there for a very long time, and they're kind of, you know, they're proper journalists who can be difficult to deal with, but also fantastic authoritative. If you've got freelancers who go off to hotspots and produce fantastic copy, and you send that in, we'll take a look at it. You know, and we'll sort of put it through the same kind of editing process and rigour as we would with anyone else. So I don't think we sort of discriminate against that kind of thing. I suppose those people would say that their challenge is that if they want to achieve bigger recognition, you know, how do they get into sort of nationals, and that depends on sort of contacts. But actually, you know, our foreign desk and every other foreign desk, I think it's incredibly keen to hear from people on the ground, and if they've got especially good stories or brilliant colour, if it's good enough, it'll get in.
That said, I mean, you're right, a lot of great work has come out from people like that, but I'd be very nervous about encouraging people just to fly off to somewhere where there are dictators and bullets flying around. You know, it's a dangerous world out there, and people get fucking killed, as we see a lot. Freelancers, you know, especially, and you know, frankly, with our move into news, you know, we you know won't take work like that. We won't take work from somebody.
How do you tell?
Well, that sounds good.
Alex,
is it like a hilarious bar? Like, then I'm on board.
How do you tell an experienced from an inexperienced? What's the screen?
One's an idiot and one's good.
That's it?
Well, no, I mean, you do a bit of research on the man or the woman.
Okay. Emma?
Well, I agree. You know, the idea of sending somebody off to a dangerous zone without any sort of, I think it fills me with absolute horror. So we wouldn't send anyone anywhere dangerous without lots and lots of preparation. Having said that, we have used stringers recently when everything kicked off in the Yazidis. We found 2 incredibly good female stringers are out there. And, you know, you look at things like, well, their track record, how long they've been there, because it's so much to do with knowing where you are. I mean, very early on in my career, I knew this very sort of cocky young Dutch journalist, and he must have been, what, 27, 28? And he was stringing for Reuters and the Financial Times, and he was a total pain in the arse, but he said, I'm going off to East Timor, and he flew off there with absolutely no preparation. Within half an hour of landing, he was dead, because he'd got on the back. All the others, the professional journalists, had all sort of clubbed together and sort of got the lay of the land and did, you know, all the sort of preparation you'd expect. He got on the back of somebody's moped thinking, I'll be the first to get the story, and that was the end of him. So we're really wary about, you know, people that are doing stuff under our name, because, you know, a dead journalist is just the worst thing that could happen to any editor.
Ian, you take information from almost anybody.
Yeah, absolutely anyone. You know, that's how we do it. But anybody can supply information to the eye, and then it's filtered through journalists who are trained by having been there a long time to spot people who are lying, people who've got a grudge, people who've got a grudge and are lying, people you know, who are genuinely acting in the public interest. There's some of them, and make that information into copy. In terms of foreign journalism, I mean, what I think is interesting in your thing, I would say there is a place for both the Vice coverage of ISIS, which is absolutely extraordinary, the man parachuted in and the religious police episode, which is fabulous, but also, if you actually want to know, a year and a half ago, what's going to happen in Iraq, you read Patrick Cockburn, because he tells you. He's fantastically well informed. He's been covering that region for 15 years at least, and he wrote a brilliant book on the Shiites. So I don't think it's either or.
And he's managed to bring out a book on ISIS already, which is
amazing.
That's because he knew
but you know,
everyone else.
It's not. Do we have people on the ground who help us, or do we have experienced journalists? I mean, there is place for both of them. I mean, we're pretty parochial, and we just have one column, which is foreign news, which is edited by someone who's been almost everywhere and knows everyone who goes anywhere. And that's how we do it. And that stuff is all sent in from people there.
I know you're saying it's not just about dangerous places, but it is worth saying about the many people who do go to dangerous places without kind of the necessary training, that if we run their byline, obviously that gives us a huge responsibility, you know, moral, legal, all the rest of it. You know, it was pretty serious even before Lord Leveson had his wits about us. So it's incredibly important that we take an interest in that person and make inquiries about their arrangements before we run that sort of byline.
What about one over here? Keep your hand up.
George, feel free to chip in on this one too. Question around newspapers, news outlets as communities. I noticed that The Guardian have started a membership scheme. I'm planning to go to the cinema this weekend with a subsidised Sunday Times cinema ticket. I just wondered what the panel made of newspapers, news outlets as communities, and the relationship between readers and those news outlets changing, obviously in a very competitive marketplace, to stay attractive, to maintain their circulations and to maintain their readerships.
The Guardian is the most recent example, but I think you could say in some way that readers as a club perhaps started with the Times, so we'll start with Emma.
Yeah, this gives me a great opportunity to talk about, thank you, membership.
Don't overdo it.
We don't have readers anymore, we have members. And yeah, we started this club, Times Plus, because, you know, when we took the decision to go behind a paywall, we had to think of ways to get people to subscribe. So, you know, a subscription to the Times doesn't just give you the newspaper, access to digital, the app. It also gives you membership of this Times Plus club. I'm delighted to hear you're taking up the cinema ticket offer. But what that does, apart from the fact that we run this programme of events, it does give us an amazing relationship with our readers, far closer than you had in the old days, where people just picked up a copy of the paper from the newsstand. We know an awful lot about our readers now, which is interesting and helpful and allows us to sort of tailor what we offer as part of the club. The Guardian Club is an interesting one because you don't get very much for your being a member. You don't get the paper because, well, you pay for that. You don't get the online, you don't get the app because it's all free. So I think it's a bit like being a patron of the British Museum or something. It's like you're signing up to say, I am a Guardian reader. You get a lot more for the Times.
Amol, are you going to do this at the Independent?
Not at the moment. I mean, the thing is that I think you mentioned local newspapers to begin with. I'm afraid I think lots of people are understandably nostalgic about the history of Fleet Street, but they're particularly nostalgic about local newspapers. And for lots of local newspapers, I can't really see a way back. So I think the role that lots of local newspapers played in their community might be gone. The thing about the digital age is it's a kind of unbundling. So, like, people like me are kind of, dare I say it, kind of promiscuous media buyers. 20 years ago, you'd have your one paper, which your family was very loyal to over many, many years. And I think now the idea behind kind of membership is to try and rebuild that attachment to a particular institution. But a third thing, which is where I've slightly, I think maybe is still possibly the most viable future for lots of newspapers, is to go down the model where you pay online. Because actually one way of creating membership is to create customers. And if you get people to pay for what you do, you create a sense of engagement. You create a sense of commitment. People want something back. And that's actually quite a useful way of establishing community. So I think, there's lots of other things you can do, like gamification, which is, cool stuff you can do in the comment streams where you get people to flag up comments or respond to stuff, and that's all very, very good. But I think until people restore the link between quality journalism and paying for it, that sense of community is going to be fractured.
I think it's interesting that these media companies talking about building a community, because I feel like the internet does that on its own. You don't need this. It's like nobody's a member of a fan club for a pop band anymore, because you can just follow them on Twitter and Facebook and stuff. It seems in a way a little outmoded to have to join a gang. I don't know. I mean, I can't imagine a single Vice reader who'd want to be a Vice member. All we do is shout at each other in the comments, and I feel like Guardian readers are the same. They're contrarian liberals who definitely wouldn't want to wear a Guardian badge. So I do find it a little bit.
But there are degrees, aren't there?
Confusing.
Because following someone on Twitter is lots of people in here follow lots of other people here having never met them, and that's an incredibly limited form of engagement. Maybe befriending someone on Facebook, where you get access to their photos from 10 years ago, is the next level up.
I'd say that definitely being that following somebody on Twitter is more engaging than joining their fan club.
It depends how much you use Twitter, doesn't it? I mean, if you're on Twitter once a week, that's different to if you're on once a month, if you're someone who just follows people, if you're someone who doesn't tweet at all yourself. And the point about membership is that you need, if you're a company which has got to hit the bottom line, which is worrying about funding, you need to try and establish a bond between you and your customers. That's what we mean by community. I mean, what it's driven by is the fact that we're all screwed financially.
But take Private Eye. I mean, everybody. Have you been to our members club?
It's called the coaching.
Keep going, Alex. Keep going.
Terrific. But everybody here reads Private Eye. Everybody here, hopefully, reads Private Eye. But Private Eye stabs everybody with an equal ferocity, and that couldn't work if you had a members club. It has to be an objective ball of like that bursts pomposity everywhere where it sees it.
That's very kind of you, but I mean, I do think Amol's right. I think reading Private Eye is like belonging to a club. I mean, I've always thought it was like that, and I read as a people who have a particular attitude and a particular desire, and I like the idea of them. But I think they form their own club. I mean, they can't come round to the office. They can't, have a cappuccino with me. They can't...
Do you ever meet them, Ian?
The readers?
Yes.
Yeah, I meet them all the time.
Oh.
They write in a lot. They email, some of them.
With their quill pens?
With their quill pens. No, I mean, they are very vocal. And they make their opinions known. But it's the idea of a club, and Amol's talking about, they've paid up. They paid to read this stuff, and I've always said, I'm say my pitch now, you know, you cannot expect me to employ Francis Wheen to write beautiful prose, or Craig Brown to write brilliant jokes, or Nick Newman to produce the best cartoons. I've got to pay these people, and you, the reader, have got to bloody well pay. And if you won't pay, you can't have any of this.
You're sounding a bit like Rupert Murdoch.
No. Rupert's 10 years too late, and he only just noticed. And he doesn't give a shit about anyone who works for him. Below the line. They can go to jail if they're there, and they can not go to jail if they're there. No, I mean, this is an entirely different crossbar.
Paid for content.
Paid for content. It isn't exactly a revolutionary idea in the history of the world, is it?
But we were the first to do it.
Well, I'm sure you were way, way ahead. But all I'm saying is, you know, you can go to a group of young people and say, you want jobs in the media. Well, I'm terribly sorry, you've stolen all the music, you've stolen all the films, and you've stolen all the journalism. You wouldn't pay for any of it, so fuck off. Which is an endearing approach. But I'm sorry, you have got to pay. And you've got to pay yourselves, and you've got to believe that you're worth paying.
This way, Max. Sorry, excuse me. Ian.
Yes, sorry, I'll
Over
stop
here.
talking.
I was just trying to get signalling. It's hard if you're right on this side of the room.
That's actually a very good note to lead on to my question. In the previous panel, we were promised a discussion in this panel of unpaid internships. So if
Ask that question.
So
start that subject.
So I read an article in The Economist, so correct me if they're wrong, that said that any internship which is more than a short period of shadowing and is unpaid is illegal. And I would probably say that most if not all of your organisations have had internships of that kind. And in the previous panel there was a lot. Not all. In the previous panel again there was kind of talk about chewing off your arm. You guys have talked about being brilliant, having all these ideas. How does that work within an industry where working for free for a year and giving those ideas away for free for a year? How does that all come together?
Amol, how do you deal with people who are working for free? If you have them.
We have lots of them, and I would, not quite up to the editor, but just below. I would defend internships. One thing I'd say about internships is that people, you know, you could say they don't enter into them voluntarily because they don't choose to be unemployed graduates living in London, which is extremely expensive. But the people that come in because they want something that we can offer them, and we try really hard to give them that. And we try and give them access to people, access to a newsroom, the opportunity to learn. I personally try and make sure, I'm going to get exposed by all the interns I haven't met here, but I personally try and make sure that I meet every single intern that comes in, which is something that they might find useful, might think is completely a waste of time. So an internship is basically a voluntary agreement, which we take, and we obviously try and make sure, and I refer you to our distinguished managing editor on this, we wouldn't want to do anything that was illegal. So, you know, if we have done something that's illegal, I'll look into it and I'll try and make sure it doesn't happen again. I don't think we do, obviously.
You're a hero.
But I don't think we do anything that's illegal. And I've done endless internships. When I graduated, I worked for various monsters on the Evening Standard, all of whom have now left my sister paper. And it was hell. It was absolute hell. 6 months, and it was painful and horrible, and I couldn't pay my rent and so on. But I benefited from it in the long term. And I think internships get a horrible time because people think that it's just a way of getting people from private schools in, and it's your mates and all that stuff. All of that stuff is true. So change internships and make them better, rather than making them illegal or banning them altogether.
Alex, you use interns?
We do, but we pay them all.
You do now?
Yeah, we do now.
There was a piece in a fortnightly magazine that suggested you should.
That was rather factually inaccurate as well.
Oh, yes.
I'd be happy to pick that up with you later.
Tell us what you're doing at the moment.
Okay,
Deal with Ian later.
We have interns for about the last year. We've been paying them. Yeah. And to be honest, we're pretty proud of what happens, with our internships because, obviously we're quite a young company. And
do they get long-term jobs with you?
Quite a lot of people do. I mean, a very large portion of our staff started as interns. The person who springs to mind is a young woman who joined as an intern about a year ago, was given a job, and last week released the documentary that she produced and hosted. And when interns join us, they go on shoots, they write for us, they get bylines. Sorry, you asked the question. I shouldn't be talking to you. But they get... which is why we started paying them. But also actually, to be fair. I think it's unarguable. I think that is what should be happening. But I will just restate, like, actually, yeah, interns with us get bylines. They don't help work on other writers' work, which is what happens at some other organisations. And they get chances to prove themselves. And actually, because we're fortunate enough to be quite a company that's expanding quite quickly, quite a lot of them end up kind of walking away with jobs. Which I guess is the ultimate
I'm
goal.
sure that claim is true, but you better make sure it'll be checked. It'll be checked by Fortnightly Magazine.
No.
Emma, are you paying your interns?
We have no unpaid interns, not even on the fashion desk. They're all paid.
I can't think why you should single out the fashion desk. Ian, are you paying your interns?
Yeah, I mean, we don't have nearly as many as them, and we don't rely on them, but we pay them, yeah.
Right. Microphone is going over there. The one perk I get is to make Max run all over the room. Speak up.
Leading on from the last question,
Hold it closer.
all the internships and jobs I've had in journalism are through making contacts by luck. So they put me in touch with someone who's looking to hire interns. How much easier do you think this is than actually just applying blindly to internships such as the Times, who must get thousands and thousands?
Emma, I think that question is for you.
Well, we do get thousands and thousands, but there's two different things. We get lots and lots of requests for sort of week-long shadowing type arrangements, which we wouldn't pay for because that's a different thing. That's coming in for a week to see how a newspaper's put together. And we do, with that, we have a very clear, there's no preferment. Everybody has to email the same person in the business, and it's divvied up, you know. There's a list, a waiting list. And then for longer internships, well, with the one we did for the leader writers, that was an application process. And so we looked at lots and lots of candidates for that. And for any other sort of longer internship, we would just apply normal, you know, the normal rules would apply. My deputy managing editor here can answer that question. Go on, Liz.
Right.
So the way we fill our paid internships is, as Emma said, we advertised, and if anyone wants to follow me on Twitter, I'm desperate for new followers, at Liz Harris London. At Liz Harris London, we advertised for the 6-week internship on our leader writing desk, and we had about 400 applications. For our news interns, they came through our grad recruitment process. So people that didn't get onto the grad scheme this year, but we thought showed real promise, we've given 6-week internships over the summer to see how they get on and encourage them to apply again next year. So I think the other thing, as Emma said, is about our work experience. We get inundated with requests for people to come and do work experience at the Times. The things that make sure you get a slot to do a week's work experience with us is we like you to be at least 20. We like you, ideally, to have gone to university, although it's not critical. And we've got examples of journalists, even recently, that have been appointed to the Times without a degree. But the passions...
Just yell.
Passion for journalism is the #1 thing that we're looking for, and I think in terms of the people that get through, particularly for work experience, it's because you can demonstrate a passion for journalism. So student newspapers, working for a regional paper, other work experience will make you stand out. We will give you a week or two's work experience with us, which is the shadowing. And if you do a great job on that, they will email Becky, who is Alan and mine and Crazy Managing Editor's PA. She'll make a note of your name, and when you apply for the grad scheme, it will be marked on your application, and you will stand out when we're sifting through the thousands of people that apply for our grad scheme.
You can't get much more detailed practical information than that. And right behind you is somebody who's going to add to it.
Just very briefly, The Independent on Sunday. You'd be amazed at how many people who apply to be an intern who put, I really love your paper, I think Guardian Weekend is amazing. Please, if you were going to apply for an internship, just find out the name of the person, demonstrate some interest in the particular publication that you're applying to, it's just astonishing that, you know. So there's a little bit of responsibility on both sides. Sorry about that, but I just want to say it.
So we'll go for a question to the panel now. Who have we got, George? Who would you like to choose?
We got one over there.
Okay.
And we got one down there next.
Okay, so is it you?
Far on the next to the wall.
It's the wall.
Keep your hand up.
Oh, there. Okay.
You put your hand. That's it. Well done. You nearly lost it.
As a girl trying to get into journalism, I've heard a lot of rhetoric and claims about the glass ceiling, about the proportion of women in newsrooms and the areas they tend to cover, as well as the role of women in stories, whether they're tend to be sort of moved into the role of the victim and that sort of thing. In your experience from the years that you've worked in journalism, what do you think about the state of women in journalism, and how do you think that's changed since you started?
Emma.
I think it's changed enormously. I really think, you know, there are lots of senior women in journalism now in a way that when I joined the FT, I think there was one senior female reporter and everyone was terrified of her. But she was a lone figure. But honestly now, certainly on the Times, there are lots of senior women, lots of women have been promoted recently. And I kind of think, I mean, you know, one wants to be vigilant. It is true that there aren't very many female, you know, national editors, but it's very different. And I kind of think worrying about women in journalism is missing the point. The real problem in journalism isn't women, it's ethnic minorities. There just aren't enough. I mean, look at this room. It's, you know, it's still a very, you know, the newsroom is still very white.
Hi.
with one notable exception.
Hey. Yeah. I was hoping you'd come in there.
Hey. What would you like me to say? I completely agree. No, I slightly disagree. I'm afraid. I mean, I'm sure I don't have the stats about the depth and scale of the problem across Fleet Street, but I don't think it's a terrible thing. I don't think we've got a huge problem. I don't think if you're a member of an ethnic minority, you're discriminated against. I don't think it's harder for people from with a Muslim name or a Hindu name, or if you're black. I mean, yeah, it's unrepresentative. There probably isn't the same proportion of people from an ethnic minority in conventional journalism as there are in the population at large, but it's getting better. You know, it's getting better. There's no obvious discrimination as far as I'm aware. You know.
There's no discrimination, it's just not enough people, you know, when we advertise for jobs, we don't get the applications. And
is that really the case? God, I'm inundated. I'm absolutely inundated. I mean, maybe that's
I find that's the case. I find that's the case, really? And I kind of see it as a problem of the country at large, to be honest. I mean, we're lucky because we're international, so we have people from all around the world anyway. But yeah, I mean, you know, in London, applications, as you say, look a bit like this room.
Next question. Right at the back. Sorry, I will come back to you, I promise. I beg your pardon. Keep going.
Hi, I want to ask you, we talk a lot about hiring, but I feel like the trend is increasingly to commission freelancers rather than hire staff writers. What do you think? Would you prefer to hire new staff writers, or would you prefer to commission stories to freelancers in general?
Alex.
I think in a perfect world we'd all have thousands and thousands of staff writers, right? But you know, freelancers offer you something that staff writers can't. You know, we're not as venerable as these guys, so you know our staff is growing and we're growing more staff writers. But yes, we do rely heavily on freelancers. But quite often, at least I find anyway, when somebody's in the office, they ended up getting lumbered with editing jobs, and they can't kind of leave their desk and be out finding those stories. And you know, there will always be an incredibly important part in journalism for the person who's out there on the street, meeting people, following connections, finding unique stories. So yeah, it's very important. But yeah, I think we'd all love much larger staffs.
Amol, has the proportion of staff to freelance changed?
I think it has actually. It's worrying, but I think it's probably true that hiring staff is something that lots of papers are more and more disinclined to do, especially because there's all this UGC, right? It's user-generated content, which is free stuff you can get online. Blogs and so on. I think it's probably true that staff, it's obviously true that staff sizes have fallen, but also that people do think ever more people could come in for freelance. And I'm not sure I've got a solution to that. I'm sorry, that's an incredibly depressing answer, but basically I think you're right.
Does it matter, Ian?
We're largely a freelance model anyway. Most people who work for the Eye work freelance. I mean, there are...
And always have.
And always have. I mean, for the last 50 years. I mean, so it's not a change for us. Nearly everybody who works there works somewhere else and comes back in with a knowledge of the outside and then something to add. So for us, it's a model that, you know, works terribly well, and it means we can have a lot more people and a lot more experts. I mean, half of them aren't even journalists, certainly not to start with. You know, the person who writes the farming column was a farmer. The person who writes the medical column was a doctor. Column entirely full of him and his mates, you know, sort of grumblings. That's how we do it. You get the experts in the field. The bloke who writes our stuff on energy worked in the nuclear industry. I mean, you can come in to the eye any way you like, really, providing you've got something to offer. But that's not a staff job. There are a small number of staff jobs, and that hasn't changed at all. So, I haven't got anything very inspiring to say, but just that there's loads of freelance work.
There's a very patient guy in a pink shirt down here, Max, who I cruelly missed out last time.
We have time for a couple of questions.
Two after that, yep.
Cool, thanks very much. Yeah, no, I'm really fascinated by this question of internships, and it seems really strange to me that we can identify the problem of such a white middle class room on the one hand, and yet freely admit that we're happy to live in a society where we don't pay people for internships. I mean, one is inherently a cause of the other. A lot of people who can't afford to live and work in the city, they're not going to be white and middle class, and they're the ones that are suffering as a result. So I think we have our finger on the trigger of the solution, and we really need to be more proactive about paying our interns for the excellent work that they do. But actually, I really was fascinated by what we were talking about with respect to paywalls, and I was hoping to ask a question about that. Slightly randomly.
Do that now.
Will do. Is there not a danger with respect to paywalls that we are talking to a members club and we're just giving them what they want to hear? You mentioned how the Times knows so much about who it is that their readership are. They can just identify exactly what it is that they're giving them. And is there a danger that we're losing some kind of originality, forthright journalism that's going to make them sit up and stand up and think, wow, this isn't something that we expected to get from the Times. There's no real thought leadership there. We're just kind of giving the consumer what they want.
Emma, I think that has to be for you.
Well, you're completely wrong, because we're always looking for new readers. If we only write stuff that the existing readers like, we'd never ever expand out to new people. Where it's useful is in things like the events that we put on. Some events sell out, others don't. It's useful to know what the members of that club will pay. Will come and see, or what they want. But in terms of actual readers, the great thing about the paywall is it gives the newspaper freedom to get on with being a newspaper, because we're not chasing clicks. We're not looking for sponsors for our columns. We're not wondering whether a particular type of article is going to attract a certain type of advertising. So once you've paid and you're behind that paywall, the Times just gets on with journalism. The journalists don't have to worry about that other stuff, and it's extremely liberating.
But it's singing to an audience that you know. It's not trying to win anyone new.
We're a national newspaper. Our readers cover the broadest spectrum. I mean, you only have to look at our comment pages. If we were talking to the same group of people, our comment pages would be half what they are today. We'll have Tim Montgomery, on one day, and then we'll have, David Aronovich saying completely the opposite thing the next day. So, you could just say Times readers are very broad-minded, but we're definitely, that way madness would lie. You'd die, I think, if you just went after one particular streak of society.
Two more quick questions, and I really should take one from that quadrant over there. Okay, this lady here, keep your hand up. That's it.
Over panel.
Keep doing that. Got it.
Cheers. I just wanted to pick up some of your points about freelancers and international coverage. It seems that, with the sort of what's happening with ISIS and the freelance journalists, that's incredibly worrying in terms of these people are taking on their own risk. They hold that risk sort of personally, yet the institutions benefit in terms of being able to rely on these freelancers to publish coverage. And also just other issues in terms of, foreign desks are shrinking. You have correspondents who are in car and then flown out to South Africa to cover the Pistorius trial. And it's a sort of question of priorities. Should these journalists, the head of the Africa desk of The Guardian, be, live tweeting the Pistorius trial when, people are getting slaughtered in car? And I guess just picking up in points and sort of, fancy correspondents getting flown in staying in great hotels, and then sort of covering lots of different countries. Sorry, lots of points. So respond to what you think is most relevant.
There's about 9 questions.
It's 9 questions. I'll stop there.
Alex, you start.
Okay.
Pick any
which
question.
I agree that that they probably shouldn't bother live tweeting the Pistorius trial. That sounds quite boring to me. I didn't bother following it.
He's not guilty of one thing.
It's crazy.
But we've got to wait till tomorrow to find out.
What were all the other questions again? I mean, look, I will go back and say that
millions of hours of tweets you've just summarised. It's great. I didn't need to know. He's innocent of one thing. Go home.
But no, I mean, obviously we recently produced a film in ISIS, and that's it's a dangerous job. But we felt that the journalist we were working with was an expert. Somebody who really knew what they were doing, somebody that we could trust, somebody that we'd had long-standing relationship with, and so we went with it. But I think you're right. I think that it's very dangerous out there, and I mean, as you said, the biggest worry any editor would ever have is that they might be putting one of their employees in danger, and I don't think that matters if they're freelance or if they're staff. At least for us, I mean, get the same insurance.
Right, last question from the lady over there. Where's Max gone? Where's the microphone? There, just behind you. That's good.
Hello, it's a bit of a simple question, but if a freelancer comes to you with a story idea and it's well thought out, but they haven't had, their work published in reputable publications, how much are you going to give it a thought? You're busy. Are you going to sort of give it any thought?
Right. Last thoughts, starting from here, Ian.
Yeah, absolutely. Why not? It may be terrifically good, it may be beautifully written, it may be really interesting. I give it as much thought as anyone else. Sorry, can I just answer the question before last, which I failed to answer because I didn't do the international one. It was the idea of just playing to your readership endlessly. I do think you have a responsibility to slightly annoy your readership. My predecessor's motto was "Sod the readers," which was his view of most stories. But it is important occasionally to think, we will run this story and they're not going to like it very much. I know they're not. They're going to write in and tell me they're going to cancel their subscriptions. But I have to gamble that they're not. And you have to do that. But it's nothing to do with payment. The reason they pay for it is in the end they think it is worth doing. And that brings them back. I mean, I have no apologies for that.
On the idea that you've never heard or seen, you don't know anything about the author.
She's going to send you something.
When I used to edit Times 2, that happened a lot. And so what I used to do is, if somebody had never written for us before and had no cuttings to show for it, but the idea looked interesting, I used to say, I'll take it on spec, which meant if I didn't like it, I wasn't going to pay for it. So it's always worth, if you're pitching to someone and you haven't written for them before, first time around, just offer to do it on spec, because then they're not committing any money to it, and you might have a break, so.
Yeah, of course. I mean, we're barely a reputable organisation, so of course we'd take it. But also I think that, at least I personally see one of the main jobs as Vice is, if you look at all the people who are now the famous writers filling up the comment pages in your paper and The Guardian, they all started working for The Face and Melody Maker, Enemy and Sounds, and that's a whole swathe of publishing which has taken a real fucking kick in the balls. And I see places like Vice as it's our responsibility to still be giving 21-year-olds, 22-year-olds, 19-year-olds, I don't care, an opportunity, good feedback, good editing, an experience, a voice. And so, yes, very, very much I would pay attention to it. I mean, not if it's rubbish.
Amol.
Couple of quick points. Freelancers, yes, definitely, we'd have a look at it. I would usually forward it onto the news desk. The shorter it is, the better. You get huge reams, which you don't want to read, but if it was 2 sentences, you would look at it. One quick point, just sort of in summary really, is a really important thing for everyone thinking about newspapers to get their head around is the fact that there is no editorial solution to the commercial problems of newspapers, right? You need to emancipate yourself from the idea that there are editorial solutions. When I got my job, first day I got emails from Ian's about to butt in because he hasn't got a digital strategy, which is why it's worked so well for him. And he doesn't work in newspapers. Newspapers, daily newspapers, there is no editorial solution to the commercial problems. There are commercial solutions. You can make digital work. You can launch a free newspaper in a big city like the Standard. You can launch the other Eye, the Eye newspaper, which is a sister of the Independent. But you've got to emancipate yourself from the idea that, you know, new headlines, new design, new columnists and all that sort of thing is going to get you a circulation of 400,000 for The Independent, which you had 20 years ago. It ain't going to happen. And once you liberate yourself from that idea, you can do the really, really exciting stuff of working out what is a journalism that pays, because you've got to be able to feed your family, and then you can go for it on that stuff. And I think it's really, really important that people understand that trying to do editorially different things in the old way just ain't going to work. And the final thing to say is I'm conscious in some of the stuff that we said, it's possible to come across slightly negatively, and I'm sorry about that. The basic point is journalism is the most fantastic profession, and you know, I think although you're about to all of us for jobs, I really would encourage all of you to go for it because it's the most incredibly fun thing. And it does seem to me that there are lots of different models working. The free premium model, which is what the FT, the New Yorker, the New York Times, all of which I pay for. The Economist that is working. The Times, which is behind a full paywall. The free model, which is Guardian, which is essentially a kind of supplementary welfare state for the liberal middle classes. that's guaranteeing full employment, which is a wonderful thing. It's all working, so I'll just say to all of you, you should go for it.
On that upbeat note, we will finish. Amol Rajan, Alex Miller, Emma Tucker, Ian Hislop, thank you very much indeed.